Things were indeed different. The very magic was somehow stronger, as though the native power had increased in his absence several times over. What had happened? He moved swiftly back to the first tether, and all was as it should be, but there was just more magic in the air, and somehow those present seemed more able to absorb such. He met with the others of the planar walkers, only to find that there were 3 fewer in number. What had happened? His mind was still racing, but the host asked the simple question, "How long was I gone?" The answer dawned on him as he looked at their faces more closely, and could see the telltale lines of age upon them. 18 years, came the reply from one of their number. But how? He had merely traversed back and forth, as he had done prior, and only lost days, perhaps a week at a time. But years? Something very strange had transpired, and he was not wrong. They began informing him of how, after he had left, the skies had slowly dimmed a little, before small tears were seen by those that could, all around the prime. The beacons they had created aided in the divination of where these tears led to, and it was to another prime. Something, somehow, had torn away from one prime directly to another, without traversing the connecting planes. He was shocked by this, as even he believed that such was not possible, especially with chrylsis forming a protective skin around and between them all. So what was happening? They continued, informing him of how the dragons had turned their attention to this phenomena, and seemed to think it possibly had something to do with the disappearance of the Grey One who he had taken. Well, that was at least a fortunate happenstance, as they would no longer be searching their own prime for them. Some good news finally. However, magic was seeping into their prime from this other, and although it was bolstering those with an affinity for such things, it had had disastrous results for those who did not. Their bodies had been overloaded by this rise in the background magic, and all non-magical creatures had succumbed to this magic-leaking sickness and passed on, all bar a few who had managed to flee to another prime. This had led to the reduction of crops and many plants, and now much of the landscape was barren, as this rising magic quite literally burned the life away from the realms. Interesting. Perhaps this could be used in the future to assault another prime, should I fathom how it was accomplished. Perhaps he should head to the other prime and see what was happening there. They continued, recounting how they had attempted to traverse to this other prime, only to be obliterated as they tried. This is how the 3 were lost, as they were the first to try. The magic flowing through was too much for them to resist, and they had been disintegrated in an instant. He gazed to the sky and located one of the tears easily. Yes, the magic was indeed deadly to them, and although not to him, it was akin to that of a line of force, only an extremely large one. But why was such power leaking here? They recounted the efforts of the dragons to venture through, but they had fled within minutes after breaching one of the tears, and had then set about erecting monuments to absorb and channel such into the native force lines. This had lessened the impact of the rising power, even though it was greatly increasing the prowess of their kind. It was an attempt to save as many of the other denizens who remained, as they said that there was no way they could seal all the tears. They had then said that all needed to make peace with their demise, or abandon this prime before the magic consumed them all. And so, 8 years prior, the exodus had begun. Every creature that was not the great scaled ones had sought refuge on other primes. Some of them apparently new primes, as though crafted for just such an event as this, others to ancient ones long forgotten. The dragons, however, stayed. as had the walkers. Most of the Sharnites had also fled, although several had remained behind. It turned out that they were all ones he had remade when he had taken them. So, my own will not flee. This was something that surprised him, but he reasoned it simply. They would lose contact with others of his kind, and become almost mindless drones as they did not truly have their own life, literally loyal to the end. So, by all accounts, there would be no interference with his assault. There was more power here than he could have hoped for, and his adversaries would be unable to stand against what amounted to a fraction of his true power when he absorbed this prime. This was almost too easy. Wait. Too easy. Perhaps that was it. Thuliseak had said he would fail by his own hand. Was this somehow his own doing? Was one of his own hosts making this happen unbeknownst to him? Then again, no one knew that he had the capacity to have multiples of himself all acting independently, at least as far as he was aware. Although Thuliseak always seemed to know things they really had no reason to. Or, more likely, Thuliseak had engineered their little talk so that another of his plans, or perhaps those of another, would play out. They had somehow trapped him in a conversation that cost him nearly 2 decades of planning and weakening of his foes. Yes, what had they done this time? But this opportunity could not be wasted. He would never have such raw power at his disposal with the astral always choking his flow, so he had to make this a reality. He had to take them and their secrets. All-out confrontation it would be. The last information that was given once his thoughts had slowed was that something had travelled through these tears, and it was aiding the dragons in performing some form of ritual. It had been seen but once, and had at least 10 arms, and stood over 12 feet in height. At the announcement of it having 10 arms, he roared out in anger, his host's form splitting and splattering across the chamber. "Thuliseak!" he roared, but he stopped. How could that be? He had been with him the whole time. Hadn't he? He stilled his thoughts and replayed the event, word by word, second by second, noting every feeling, every sense, sense. "You clever bastard," he said slowly, realizing what had possibly transpired. "You were never even there." He remembered how, with every contact with his adversary, although he could not replicate or fathom what it was, there was always a sense of power, or that of their crafting. But this last time there had been nothing at all. He had been duped by what was seemingly another of their tricks. Too clever. One day you will slip, and I will be there to claim you as my own. He grinned from the shattered remnants of his host. One day they would be his puppet, but till then he had to deal with not only the dragons, but apparently Thuliseak as well. An opportunity for sure, but he had a sinking feeling he was waiting for him, and he had had 18 years to prepare. So he must act swiftly and decisively. They had to fall, all of them, and it had to be fast.